The disappearance began with a furious final roar that echoed through her quiet house, leaving behind a baffled town and a husband whose story hinged on a voluntary exit. For 20 years, her vanishing remained an uncrackable mystery until a seemingly insignificant object, forgotten by time, emerged to transform a cold case into a shocking revelation. In 1992, in the coastal city of Portofino, Italy, the sudden disappearance of 38-year-old Nora Whitman initially caused only brief concern, but it soon hardened into one of the region's most baffling missing person cases of the decade. Nora had recently embarked on her second marriage. She had wed Dennis Wilson, moved into his villa overlooking the Ligurian Sea, and attempted to establish a routine for their newly merged lives. Her 13-year-old son from her previous marriage, Luca, remained temporarily with Eliza's sister in Milan so he could complete the academic year without disruption. This separation was meant to be temporary, with plans for Luca to join his mother and stepfather later that summer. From the outside, the family's transition appeared unremarkable. On July 5th, neighbors in the exclusive hillside community reported hearing loud, sharp voices emanating from the Wilson residence. Several residents noted that the commotion took place late in the evening and was intense enough to cut clearly through the night air. The sounds they described pointed to a fierce argument, far beyond a typical marital disagreement. While no specific words were recalled, the character of the shouting was consistently described as distressed and highly volatile. This confrontation marked the last verified instance of anyone hearing Nora inside her home. By the next morning, she was gone. According to Marco's account, which he later provided to authorities, a vicious argument had erupted the night before. He claimed that during the clash, Nora declared she was completely fed up, announced her intention to leave, and gathered a duffel bag and some personal belongings before storming out. He stated that when he returned from his early shift at the shipyard the following morning, she had not returned. Before we reveal the next twist, give us a moment of your time. We thrive on your support, so smash that like button and ensure you're subscribed and have the notification bell active so you don't miss our deep dives into the world's most compelling mysteries. Dennis did not alert the local carabinieri, police, contact neighbors, or notify any family members about her sudden departure. He maintained that she was a mature woman who had chosen to walk away and was entitled to her privacy. 2 weeks passed before Eliza's sister and parents began to sense that something was desperately wrong. Nora had a steadfast habit of calling Luca, checking on his progress in school, and keeping in touch with her close relatives. When the calls abruptly ceased, the family immediately recognized the unnatural silence. At her workplace, a busy Portofino art gallery, colleagues reported that she had not shown up for her scheduled shifts and had failed to give any notice of her absence. Attempts by her parents to reach her through Dennis resulted in vague and frustrating replies. He informed them that the couple had quarreled, and Nora just needed space, insisting she had taken a break and would return when she felt ready. As more days bled into silence, Eliza's family took decisive action. They traveled to the Portofino Carabinieri station and filed an official missing person report, prompting the first involvement of law enforcement. The initial police response involved a standard welfare check and a brief inspection of the Wilson villa. Officers observed no obvious evidence of a struggle. The furniture was orderly, no blood or property damage was noted, and nothing suggested a forced entry. Eliza's small, red Fiat was still parked in the garage. Some clothing and one duffel bag were missing, but her passport, essential documents, and financial records necessary for significant international travel remained in the home. Investigators formally recorded Marco's explanation that she had left of her own accord, and after intense pressure from Eliza's family, he provided a sworn statement to the police. Early investigative procedures involved checking regional hospitals, but no unidentified female patient matching Eliza's description had been admitted. City morgues reported no unidentified remains consistent with her age or appearance. Officers reviewed local hotel registers, finding no bookings under her name, and examined bank records, which showed no large withdrawals, no ticket purchases, or any indication that she was planning to relocate. Based on the available data, Nora had abandoned the resources typically needed for long-distance travel, making the voluntary disappearance theory difficult to accept. Approximately 1 month after Nora vanished, an unexpected event occurred. A small, carefully taped box arrived at the home of Eliza's parents in Milan. The return address on the package indicated the Golden Palm Resort, Monte Carlo, Monaco. Inside, items belonging to Nora were placed in an organized manner. Her favorite silk scarf, her driver's license, and the house keys to the Portofino villa. A note printed on what appeared to be hotel stationery was included. It contained a short message, written as if from the resort's lost and found service, claiming the belongings had been discovered in a guest's room after their checkout and were being mailed to the address found with the items. The police immediately contacted the Golden Palm Resort. Hotel management responded with unambiguous information that contradicted the package's implication. Records confirmed that no guest named Nora Whitman had checked in during the relevant dates. There were no reservation payments, no paper logs showing a stay, and no receipts indicating that any employee had mailed a package to Milan. Furthermore, the printed letterhead used in the note belonged to an obsolete template no longer in use by the resort. The hotel also confirmed that mailing unclaimed items without formal documentation was not their standard procedure. This meant the package was not sent through official resort channels. Investigators flagged the parcel as highly suspicious, but at that stage, they lacked concrete evidence identifying the person who had assembled and mailed it. The package did not immediately break the case. Detectives attempted to verify whether Nora had traveled to Monaco, but no airline records, long-distance bus entries, or witness accounts supported this possibility. Officers reviewed Marco's phone activity, his attendance at the shipyard, and records of his movements during the period surrounding the disappearance. None of these inquiries yielded evidence placing him out of Italy or contradicting his prior statements. Without a body, a discernible crime scene, or confirmed links to Monaco, the case lacked the foundation necessary for formal criminal proceedings. As months turned into a year, the investigation gradually ground to a halt. Detectives kept the file open but had run out of fresh leads to pursue. Luca matured, and while he developed an unwavering personal conviction that his mother would never have abandoned him, no verifiable information existed to support his deep-seated fear. For him, the memory of his fractured family life remained unresolved. For the police, the situation remained an open but stagnant missing person case. By the close of the 1990s, the file was effectively archived, classified as an unresolved disappearance with suspicious circumstances and one unexplained package from another country that offered no actionable path forward. By the early 2000s, the disappearance of Nora Whitman had almost entirely receded from active attention within the Portofino Carabinieri. In official summaries, it existed only as a dated entry categorized as an unresolved missing adult case from the early 1990s. The file was stored among other cold cases, only referenced for routine reporting or administrative updates. Over time, it became another statistical marker, disconnected from the daily concerns of investigators who now focused on newer incidents with more immediate leads. While the case had lost its urgency within the system, it remained a persistent and unresolved presence in the life of Eliza's son, Luca. For him, the absence never faded into the background. It continued to exist as an open wound that no official document could close. Luca had grown into adulthood with this unanswered element at the core of his personal history. He had moved away from Milan, built an independent life in London, secured a stable job as a financial analyst at a brokerage, and adapted to responsibilities centered on market trends, client portfolios, and regulatory compliance. Yet, despite the geographical and emotional distance from his childhood home, reminders of his mother surfaced regularly. Each phone call with his aunt, each mention of the past, reinforced the unresolved nature of the disappearance. Although Luca had long been certain that his mother would not have willingly abandoned him, he had never possessed any definitive evidence to act on this belief. His conviction remained a private certainty without any concrete foundation. In July 2012, the day that dramatically shifted the dormant trajectory of the case began as an unremarkable workday. Luca was meeting with a new client at a satellite office in Paris, a routine meeting to process intake forms for a large investment portfolio. The meeting started on time, and among the new arrivals was a man who approached the desk to finalize his registration. As Luca entered the man's details into the firm's digital system, he reached the field for the name and heard him provide it. He typed Dennis Wilson into the entry form, and the sight and sound of that name triggered an immediate, visceral recognition. He looked up and identified the man standing before him as Dennis Wilson, his former stepfather. Time had changed him, adding gray to his hair and visible weight, but the fundamental features of his appearance remained unmistakable. He was now part of a new family structure, signing up a portfolio alongside his new wife. Inside the brokerage, his presence carried no official significance. Staff were obligated to process clients without regard to personal associations. The process proceeded as usual. For compliance purposes, the new client was provided with a standard paper form requiring handwritten contact details, emergency contacts, and signatures. The man completed the form at the counter and returned it for filing. Luca added the document to the day's stack and continued with his duties, his mind reeling. Only after the office closed did Luca return to the form. The building was quiet, and he had time to scrutinize the entries Dennis had written. He noted the structure of the handwriting, the consistent upward slant, the peculiar style of his numerals, especially the shaping of 3s and 4s, and the form of the capital E marked by a distinct double crossbar. These traits were not immediately actionable, but they were familiar enough to arrest his attention. The writing on the form represented the first physical sample he had seen from Dennis in many years. That evening, he drove to his aunt's apartment where documents related to the disappearance had been preserved. Among these items was the original envelope that had arrived from Monaco back in 1992. Inside the box, stored in the back of a filing cabinet, the envelope remained alongside old police reports, news clippings, and correspondences from the early investigation. Luca retrieved the envelope and placed it beside a photocopy of the newly completed client form. He meticulously compared the handwritten address with the writing samples from the afternoon's appointment. The similarities were striking. The same unusual misspelling appeared in his aunt's surname, a mistake Dennis had made frequently in the past when writing family addresses. The shape of the capital M on the envelope matched the one on the client form, including a distinct, almost triangular formation at the base. The spacing and structure of the numbers were similar. The overall formation of the letters reflected the same unique writing habits. No specialized training was required to recognize the consistent patterns. It was evident that the handwriting on the envelope, supposedly penned by an employee at a Monaco resort, shared defining characteristics with the handwriting on the client form written earlier that day in Paris. For the first time, Luca possessed something tangible that aligned with his long-standing suspicions. The comparison did not prove a crime, but it definitively contradicted the original explanation surrounding the package from Monaco. The envelope had been treated as a simple lost and found mailing from an unknown hotel worker. The handwriting now suggested that it was linked to the very man who had been present in the office that afternoon. It provided Luca with a specific and verifiable basis to take action. The following day, he went to the London Metropolitan Police. He brought both documents, the original Monaco envelope and the photocopy of the client form. He presented a detailed statement outlining his mother's disappearance, the history of the investigation, the circumstances surrounding the suspicious package, and the identity of the man who had filled out the recent form. His explanation included why the handwriting comparison had drawn his attention and why he believed it warranted an official review. Officers documented his account and logged the two documents as items of potential evidentiary value. Through interagency communication channels, the London police requested the complete archived file from the Portofino Carabinieri. Several weeks later, the cold case unit received the full documentation, including the original missing person report, initial investigative notes, the hotel's response confirming Nora had never checked in, and internal remarks noting Marco's unusually passive behavior during the early stages of the investigation. The case was formally assigned to Detective Inspector Sofia Conti, who specialized in reviewing older files where surviving evidence consisted primarily of documents and indirect indications. Conti began by sending the envelope and the client form to a forensic graphology laboratory, along with a request for multiple known samples of Dennis Wilson's writing to create a valid comparison group. At the same time, while reviewing the Portofino material, she noted a reference to Marco's employment in the early 1990s at a shipping logistics company where his responsibilities had included overseeing the transport of valuable goods across international borders. Although this information had produced no leads in 1992, it acquired new significance when considered alongside the disputed package from Monaco. To clarify whether Marco's movements during that period intersected with travel to the French Riviera, Conti submitted formal requests to the logistics company's archives and affiliated transportation logs. This was routine procedure, but it represented a crucial step in determining whether the newly surfaced handwriting similarity could be connected to a broader pattern of actions. As handwriting experts began their analysis and old company records were located, the case of Nora Whitman moved for the first time in years from dormancy toward renewed investigative momentum. The forensic graphology report reached the cold case unit 3 weeks after the materials had been submitted. It was a comprehensive document that analyzed every measurable aspect of the writing samples. The angle of downward strokes, the structure of individual letters, the proportion between upper and lowercase characters, and the spacing between numerals. The analysis highlighted rare identifiers, including the distinct, triangular capital M and a peculiar rendition of the number 4 formed with a short horizontal line intersecting the main vertical stroke. These characteristics appeared consistently in both the address written on the 1992 envelope for Monaco and the details on the insurance form completed by Dennis Wilson in Paris in 2012. The conclusion stated with high statistical certainty that both documents had been written by the same person. For Detective Inspector Sofia Conti, this assessment carried enormous weight. The envelope, long considered an unexplained oddity rather than evidence, now pointed squarely toward the missing woman's husband, eliminating the earlier assumption of an anonymous hotel employee and providing the first verifiable connection between Dennis and the misleading Monaco package. With the handwriting match established, Conti moved to the next phase, verifying whether Dennis had physically traveled to Monaco during the period when the package had been mailed. To do this, she needed the archived materials from the logistics company where Dennis had worked in 1992. The company's storage boxes contained handwritten manifests, delivery confirmation sheets, and vehicle assignment records, all maintained before the transition to digital systems. Conti received dozens of pages, some faded with age, and began examining them chronologically. She noted dates, cargo codes, destinations, and signatures. One entry dated approximately 10 days after Nora disappeared stood out immediately. According to the log, a shipment of luxury textiles had been transported from Portofino to a storage facility near Monte Carlo. The accompanying manifest listed Dennis Wilson as the individual responsible for accompanying the high-value cargo to its destination. The signature on the form matched the samples already collected for graphological analysis. Although not a direct proof of wrongdoing, this document placed Dennis in Monaco at a critical time. Conti recognized the need for a thorough confirmation of these details. So, she contacted the customs agency associated with the shipment. Their archived delivery records also contained Marco's initials on the sheet documenting receipt of the goods at the Monte Carlo facility. The date of arrival aligned closely with the estimated time frame during which the envelope from the Golden Palm Resort had been mailed. With a verified travel route that connected Dennis to Monaco shortly after Eliza's disappearance, and with a handwriting match linking him to the suspicious package, the investigative picture became increasingly coherent. However, Conti understood that circumstantial evidence alone would not support a murder charge. Additional physical proof was required to build a complete case. This necessity prompted Conti to examine the residence where Nora and Dennis had lived in 1992. The villa had long since been sold, and a different family now lived there. Conti contacted the current homeowners, explained that the property had been associated with an unresolved disappearance, and asked whether any unusual findings had been made during recent maintenance or renovations. The owners mentioned that contractors had recently been repairing a cracked section of the stone patio just outside the living room door and had encountered a small area beneath the flagstones where the original soil had been excavated and replaced with a rough concrete patch. The owners had not reported it previously, believing it to be the result of a past structural repair. Within the context of an active cold case review, however, the detail carried entirely different implications. Conti documented the information and filed a request for a search warrant to examine the area beneath the patio. Once granted, a forensic team arrived at the property and carefully broke through the concrete section. Beneath it, they found fragments of the original flagstone, which displayed discolored patches that had been shielded from light and exposure for years. The pattern and depth of these stains suggested they were not superficial. Alongside the stone fragments, investigators collected soil samples and recovered a silver locket and a small gold hoop earring. According to family descriptions recorded in earlier reports, Nora had last been seen wearing similar jewelry. Every item recovered was sealed and transported to a forensic laboratory for analysis. Conti understood that the outcome of the laboratory testing would determine the direction of the investigation. If the discolorations on the flagstones were confirmed as human blood linked to Eliza's maternal line, it would indicate that a violent incident had occurred inside or near the home and that substantial effort had been made to conceal it after the initial police inspection. Such a finding would challenge the long-standing assumption that Nora had voluntarily walked away and would support the theory that her disappearance was the result of criminal activity. Several weeks later, the laboratory delivered its results. The fragments of flagstone contained preserved traces of human blood. Mitochondrial DNA testing revealed a match consistent with Eliza's maternal relatives. This meant that the biological material belonged either to Nora herself or to a direct maternal line family member, a possibility that held no relevance given the context of the disappearance. The significance of the forensic findings was clear. Blood linked to Nora had been present at the property and had been deliberately concealed beneath concrete sometime after the initial police visit in 1992. For Conti, the chain of evidence was now taking shape. Marco's presence in Monaco at the time the package was mailed, the handwriting analysis identifying him as the sender, the hidden concrete patch under the patio, the blood consistent with Eliza's genetic line, and the recovered personal items formed a trajectory pointing toward a single conclusion. The case had shifted decisively away from any voluntary disappearance theory. The next steps involved confronting Dennis with the new evidence and informing Eliza's family of the developments. For the first time since the original investigation, the case no longer resembled an unresolved mystery. It now aligned with the structure of a concealed homicide inquiry. With the foundation of evidence finally established, the investigation moved toward the critical phase of interviews, family notifications, and the formation of a prosecutable narrative to address what had been missed in 1992. With the completed forensic reports assembled in the case file, Detective Inspector Sofia Conti moved into the next operational stage of the renewed investigation. The evidence now included a confirmed handwriting match between the 1992 envelope and the 2012 client form, verified documentation placing Dennis Wilson in Monaco shortly after Eliza's disappearance, and the recently uncovered and tested material recovered from beneath the Portofino Villa's patio. Each component pointed toward a single trajectory, and Conti proceeded by issuing an official summons for Dennis to appear for questioning. This meeting differed fundamentally from the interviews conducted many years earlier. The subject matter no longer revolved around recollections of past events or broad statements regarding the missing woman. Instead, it focused on established and measurable facts supported by scientific and administrative records. Dennis arrived at the station displaying outward composure, presenting himself as cooperative and maintaining that he had nothing to hide. His demeanor suggested confidence, although the file now contained multiple items that directly contradicted the explanations he had provided in the past. Conti began by confronting him with questions about the package sent from Monaco. Dennis reiterated that he had no knowledge of it, stating that he had learned about the parcel only years after it had been received by Eliza's parents. Conti then presented him with a copy of the client form completed in Paris and the handwriting analysis confirming a strong likelihood that he had authored both documents. Dennis reacted with visible tension. He insisted that handwriting similarities were coincidental or possibly the result of writing the address in haste on an unrelated occasion. These claims were recorded, yet they did not align with the findings of the forensic specialists who had identified numerous unique markers present in both samples. Conti progressed to the next segment of evidence, showing Dennis the logistics company documents indicating that a week and a half after Eliza's disappearance, he had transported a valuable shipment from Portofino to the Monte Carlo region. The tangible record of his presence in the state during that period carried significant weight. Marco's response grew inconsistent. He stated that he did not recall the specifics of the trip and speculated that the paperwork might have been inaccurate despite the clear signature matching his known samples. He also denied any connection to the shipment of personal items that had arrived from Monaco. His answers were documented by investigators, though the contradictions between his statements and the written evidence became increasingly apparent. Conti then presented photographs of the concealed patio section from the Portofino villa. These images displayed the concrete ceiling, the stone fragments extracted from beneath it, and the biochemical staining that had been preserved for years. The DNA test results had linked the blood to Eliza's maternal line. Dennis viewed the photographs and insisted that he had never performed repairs under the patio and had no explanation for the presence of blood. Yet, the connection between the recovered material and Nora was definitive. The sequence of inquiries now formed a cohesive structure: a forged impression of travel by the missing woman, a misleading package originating from Monaco, a documented trip by Dennis to that same region, and concealed evidence within the former home. The combination created a progressively tighter evidentiary pattern. While Conti compiled and organized Marco's statements, the investigative team communicated the laboratory results to Eliza's family. Her parents, who had endured years of uncertainty, received a briefing with a quiet and restrained response. The detective outlined the findings carefully, noting the handwriting match, the travel records, and the concealed biological evidence. Their reaction reflected the immense emotional weight of the information. They had suspected for years that their daughter had not left voluntarily. The confirmation that her blood had been found beneath the home represented a difficult but decisive point. Luca, who had played a direct role in reopening the case by recognizing the handwriting and alerting authorities, attended the meeting. For him, the developments were painful but aligned with expectations he had held since childhood. He explained that the envelope had remained the focal point of his doubts for many years, and the discovery of the handwriting match validated his long-standing concerns. Meanwhile, the forensic unit continued formalizing its analysis of the recovered physical items. The silver locket and the small gold hoop earring matched the descriptions provided by Eliza's family regarding what she had worn on the day of her disappearance. These items strengthened the connection between the concealed patio and the missing woman. When combined with the DNA results and the concrete ceiling, they supported the theory that the material under the patio had been deliberately hidden after the events of 1992. Each technical report reinforced the growing foundation of the case, and the Crown Prosecution Service began its internal evaluation. The prosecutor reviewed the assembled evidence: the handwriting match from 2 different decades, the verified travel route to Monaco soon after the disappearance, the forensic identification of maternal line DNA beneath the home, the presence of Eliza's personal items in the patio debris, and the lack of any alternative explanation for the sequence of events. Based on this information and the absence of a statute of limitations for homicide, the prosecutor authorized the preparation of charges against Dennis Wilson. The case now moved from investigative review to criminal proceedings. When officers arrived to take Dennis into custody, he did not resist. He was transported to the station for formal charging procedures. During subsequent questioning, he continued to deny responsibility. His narrative remained unchanged. He claimed that Nora had left on her own, that he had not sent the Monaco package, and that he could not account for the presence of her blood beneath their former home. Despite these assertions, he did not provide any consistent or verifiable alternative explanation for the documented findings, leaving the evidence effectively uncontested. Investigators recorded the reactions of the family following the arrest. For Eliza's parents, the moment brought not closure, but the end of a prolonged state of agonizing uncertainty. The arrest lay in finally having a supported explanation. For Luca, the arrest represented the culmination of a search for truth that had defined much of his life. He understood that the case had progressed not because of speculation, but because the evidence had been examined with precision and consistency. With the arrest completed and the chain of evidence documented, the investigation entered its next phase. The task ahead involved constructing a complete reconstruction of the events that occurred in 1992 using the physical and documentary materials accumulated through the renewed inquiry. The case now stood ready for the analytical process that would attempt to clarify step by step what had happened inside the Wilson household nearly 20 years earlier. Detective Inspector Sofia Conti began the primary analytical task, establishing the full sequence of events that had occurred in the Wilson household on the night of July 5, 1992. The reconstruction aimed to identify not only when and where the fatal event took place but also how Dennis acted in the minutes, hours, and days that followed. The sequence began with what was known from witness accounts. During the late evening hours, neighbors heard a loud argument from inside the house. The descriptions indicated raised voices, escalating tension, and the kind of confrontation that suggested a long brewing conflict rather than a brief disagreement. Within the context of the reconstruction, the argument formed the final stage of an already strained relationship. Conti determined that the confrontation likely moved from verbal dispute to physical violence just after nightfall, when the shouting abruptly ceased and no further sounds of movement or conversation were noted by anyone outside. During the final moments of the argument, Dennis physically shoved Nora with enough force to send her off balance. She fell backward against the sharp, decorative marble ledge of a fireplace, striking her head on the corner. The impact produced a deep cranial trauma and immediate collapse, causing rapid blood loss onto the visible flagstone floor. The nature of the injury matched blunt force trauma caused by contact with a fixed household structure rather than a handheld weapon, which explained both the concentrated staining pattern later found beneath the patio and the absence of any identifiable weapon in the home. The impact would have been strong enough to cause rapid blood loss and immediate incapacitation. There were no signs that she attempted to leave the home afterward. The reconstruction placed a fatal moment within minutes of the dispute heard by the neighbors. Once the violence had occurred, Dennis was left alone in the house with a body, a damaged section of floor, and no clear plan. The next stage of the reconstruction examined his actions from the moment of the fatal blow until sunrise. Conti determined that Dennis spent the night dealing with the immediate consequences of the assault. The absence of any visible traces during the 1992 police inspection showed that he had taken significant steps to clean the surface area of the floor and surrounding surfaces. The stone tiles beneath the later concrete patch had originally been part of the visible patio, meaning Dennis removed them at some point during the cleanup. He wiped the top layer thoroughly, disposed of visible debris, and attempted to restore the appearance of normalcy. The reconstruction then examined the question of what Dennis did with Eliza's body. The lack of remains suggested that he removed it from the home before dawn. Conti placed this action shortly after the cleaning phase when Dennis would have needed to prevent the discovery of the body during the next day's routine. Given the time constraints and his familiarity with the surrounding area, he most likely transported the body in his vehicle under the cover of darkness. The reconstruction did not specify the exact location where the remains were taken, only that they were removed from the premises within hours of the incident and were never recovered. With the body gone and the surface cleaned, Dennis faced the secondary challenge of hiding the deeper traces that could not be eliminated by wiping. The porous stone and soil beneath the floor had absorbed biological fluids, and Dennis would have recognized that surface cleaning alone was insufficient to permanently conceal what had occurred. Conti concluded that the decision to seal the area under concrete was made quickly, likely within a day or two after the incident. Dennis would have acquired the materials, removed the compromised stones, placed them beneath the house, and poured a concrete layer over the open section to block visual detection. This construction was crude and deliberately concealed, performed without notifying authorities or contractors, and was designed to create the appearance of a simple patio repair. After dealing with the physical aftermath, Dennis moved into the phase of fabricating an alternative explanation for Eliza's disappearance. The reconstruction identified this stage as beginning in the days immediately after July 5 when he told relatives and neighbors that Nora had left voluntarily. His statements were consistent. He claimed she had taken a duffel bag, said she was tired of everything, and walked out during the night. For several days, this version remained unchallenged because there was no contradictory evidence visible inside the house. The final stage of the reconstruction involved the decision to create a false trail pointing toward Monaco. This portion of the timeline aligned with Marco's documented work assignment transporting high-value cargo across state lines. According to company records, he traveled to the Monaco region approximately 1 week after Nora vanished. Conti connected this trip to the creation of the misleading package. Dennis used the opportunity to address and mail a box containing some of Eliza's belongings to her parents. Using the template of a hotel's lost and found apartment as a cover, by presenting the envelope as though it came from a resort in Monte Carlo, he constructed the illusion that Nora had traveled internationally and had stayed in a specific location. The handwritten address, designed to appear casual, included minor errors that would make it seem hastily written by a hotel clerk. Dennis sent the package during his work trip, intending it to serve as the only tangible indicator of Eliza's supposed movements. This act represented the most deliberate component of the cover-up. It extended the false narrative beyond the home and attempted to shift the disappearance into an international context. Conti reviewed the entire timeline once more, aligning the known events with the logical order of Marco's actions. First came the argument, then the fatal blow. The immediate cleanup followed. After that, the removal of the body. Next came the effort to hide the traces beneath the patio. Finally, the creation of the Monaco Trail. Each stage fit into a coherent structure supported by factual documentation gathered during the reopened investigation. The absence of competing explanations or involvement of additional parties reinforced the clarity of the reconstruction. By the time Conti completed the report for the prosecutor, the narrative of the crime had shifted from unresolved disappearance to a methodical sequence of violence, concealment, and misdirection. The findings formed the backbone of the criminal case, establishing motive, opportunity, and a pattern of actions that aligned directly with the behavior of the accused. With the reconstruction finalized, the investigation stood ready for the legal phase that would determine how the events of 1992 would be addressed in court. The trial of Dennis Wilson began several months after the charges were formally issued, marking the transition from investigative review to full judicial examination. The case drew notable attention from international reporters, whose coverage emphasized the unusual path the investigation had taken. The narrative that reached the courtroom had been shaped by years of uncertainty, followed by a structured return to factual clarity, and it would now be tested before a jury. The prosecution approached the case methodically, choosing to outline its argument through a linear timeline that demonstrated how the original investigation failed due to the absence of information later recovered. They reviewed the early history of the disappearance, noting the lack of findings during the initial search in 1992. Their presentation then moved into the modern developments, including expert evaluations and documentary confirmations. They emphasized that the handwriting comparison was not a subjective observation but an analysis supported by multiple consistent markers. The travel records were introduced to show a verified chronology, and the concealed structural modification on the patio was described in a procedural context. Forensic specialists addressed the biological components of the case with precision. They explained how material preserved beneath the concrete could remain intact for years and why its identification carried evidentiary weight. They outlined the significance of genetic matching within the maternal line and clarified how established methodologies ruled out accidental contamination. The prosecution framed these details not as isolated technical findings but as interconnected elements that reflected deliberate concealment. They highlighted the defendant's lack of initiative during the original disappearance and the absence of any actions consistent with a spouse attempting to locate a missing partner. The defense centered its strategy on introducing doubt. Their argument suggested that the biological traces could have originated from unrelated circumstances, that the patio repairs might have been completed by previous owners, and that similarities in handwriting could arise among individuals without intent to deceive. Despite these attempts, the defense was unable to produce independent documentation, witness testimony, or expert opinion to support any alternative explanation. When questioned about the Monaco trip, Dennis responded with general statements regarding memory lapses. When asked about the mailing of the package, he repeated that he lacked knowledge of its origin. Luca was called to testify regarding the moment he recognized his former stepfather in the Paris office and the steps he took afterward. His account focused on the sequence of events that led him to contact police rather than emotional interpretation. He described the encounter, the decision to compare the writing, and the subsequent contact with the authorities. His testimony helped the jury understand how the dormant case had been revived based on tangible material rather than personal suspicion. After the closing arguments, the jury retired for deliberation. The discussion lasted a relatively short period, reflecting the structured nature of the evidence. When they returned to the courtroom, the verdict was delivered unanimously. Dennis Wilson was found guilty of the murder of Nora Whitman and of fabricating a misleading narrative intended to divert investigators. The judge imposed a life sentence with a recommendation for a minimum of 25 years in prison. The court emphasized that the crime had been intentional, concealed with calculated actions, and left unresolved for many years due to deliberate misdirection. News of the verdict reached Marco's current family shortly after the sentencing. The woman who had accompanied him to the office and the child who had stood beside him during that routine appointment were reported to have been shocked by the outcome. They had not been aware of the details of the decades-old disappearance and had believed his version of events until the evidence surfaced. Their reaction was described in case notes as one of disorientation rather than confrontation, a response shaped by the sudden revelation that a person they trusted had been living for years with undisclosed actions in his past. For Eliza's parents, the verdict marked the first definitive resolution after a long period marked by devastating uncertainty. They listened to the sentencing with measured composure, recognizing that the decision provided documentation and clarity rather than emotional closure. Luca received the outcome as a confirmation of the questions he had carried since childhood. He understood that the truth did not restore what had been lost, but it ended the ambiguity that had shaped his life for nearly 20 years. The trial concluded the case of Nora Whitman, transforming a disappearance once regarded as inexplicable into a crime reconstructed and proven through persistent analysis and the emergence of overlooked details brought forward by time and the dedication of a son. Remember the victims and their stories. Subscribe for more true crime documentaries that demand justice.